E-commerce over the last decade have been ever changing, and so laws and legislations have to adapt to make sure they protect the customer. The SMEs we will be discussing during this presentation are all original ideas by the entrepreneur, and so are protected by the intellectual property rights. Chaffee defines IPR to protect design ideas and inventions that include content service development for e-commerce sites. Copyright is designed to protect authors and inventors through ensuring they see some return from their work every time that it's experienced. For most digital businesses, it is imperative that they stay competitive in their respective markets, and the intellectual property rights will protect them if they have an innovative idea within the market. Catherine Slave says that the Commission repeatedly emphasises the importance of intellectual property for innovation and intellectual assets central to success in the new knowledge economy. Ways in which companies can protect themselves from the intellectual property theft is using such websites as copyscape.com, which will show a company where their logos, trademarks and content are being used by other websites. James Fryer from SoClose.com used Copyscape and had spotted 100 online infringements of their content in the last year. A famous example of the Intellectual Property Act being broken would be the Winklevoss twins versus Mark Zuckerberg. The legal case against Facebook dates back to 2004, when the brothers Cameron and Taylor Winklevoss, who funded the social networking website ConnectU, accused Mr. Zuckerberg of copying their ideas, and so Mr. Zuckerberg was fined £20 million.
So the legislation I'm going to discuss is the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations. Now this act is often referred to as the CPRs and has been in place since May 2008. So this particular form of legislation applies to all businesses that operate within the UK, Scotland and Wales that have consumers. It also applies to all those that operate within the EU. Now generally speaking, this act covers all commercial practices between traders and consumers, including prohibitions for cases of unfair trading. Now the Act is split into 4 pieces generally. So the first part is 31 practices that are always considered to be banned. So these will be prohibited in case any of these are breached. The second one is any misleading acts and omissions. So these are practices that are likely to cause the average consumer to take a decision that they wouldn't have otherwise made. The third part is aggressive practices. These are those that pressure consumers into making decisions that they wouldn't normally make. And generally speaking, the final part is some rules that both consumers and traders should abide by. So what would happen if you broke this law? Well, there's 2 parts to it. So there's an on-action summary conviction. So it's a fine not exceeding the maximum, which is currently at £5,000. And other than that, there's the on-conviction on indictment, which is an unlimited fine and could also see you get 2 years imprisonment for not abiding by this rule.
The Electronic Commerce Regulations 2002 are legal rules that apply to online retailers and services. It's a European legislation that applies when dealing with customers and organisations within the EU. Services covered by the Act include paid and free information services, selling products and services online, professional services, entertainment such as Netflix, internet and telephone services such as Skype. Information that must be provided to the customer includes technical steps when placing an order, the terms and conditions which need to be able to be stored and reproduced, clear pricing including shipping and tax, the name of the service provided including a business email and the geographical address of the organisation, order confirmation and the ability to amend input errors during the order process, the company registration number and registration location, and membership details. If you do not comply with the regulation, the contract with the customer becomes invalid and is considered a breach of statutory duty, meaning that you break in e-trading laws, and this can result in prosecution. Transactions must abide by the International Market Clause, stating that you must follow the laws within the hosting business country and the organisation can't restrict incoming business.
The Data Protection Act is a legislation in place to protect personal data which organisations, companies and even the governments hold about people in the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. The Act has 8 main principles. The data must be adequate and relevant, processed fairly and lawfully, obtained for only one or more specified and lawful purposes, accurate and up to date, processed in accordance with the rights of the Act, not kept for longer than is necessary, is secure, and is not transferred to other countries without adequate protection. Some examples from the ICO of breaches of the Data Protection Act include sending spam texts, sending information to the wrong recipient, confusing customer records. An example of a breach of the Data Protection Act was in January 2013, where Sony Entertainment were fined £250,000 and made to make a public apology for failing to protect their PlayStation users, where 70 million login details and credit card details were leaked. Penalties for breaching the Data Protection Act can include fines up to £500,000, prosecutions, and court undertakings to ensure the law is understood by each company.
All-in-one ID is a new innovative way to use RFID cards. Many people today carry around numerous travel cards including Oyster or National Rail or contactless payment cards. These all contain RFID strips that, on contact with a reading pad, will create a transaction. All-in-one ID will allow people to put all these contactless cards into one easy-use wristband. Of course, like every other e-commerce business operating in the UK market, All-in-one ID will be subject to abide to all UK laws and legislations. Due to the nature of the business, All-in-one ID will be supplying a product and a service, therefore will increase the amount of laws and legislations that it will need to abide by. But I feel that data protection is the most important for my business, so I would go into it in more depth. When selling the wristbands to the customers, we will require payment details and customer details, for example address. Similar to this, the service being provided will be holding customer Oyster card details or bank details on RFID strip. We will need to put measures into place to safeguard personal data against unauthorized, unlawful processing or accidental loss, destruction or damage. The first measure that I will be taking is to ensure that only authorized personnel can access the data by distribution of jobs within the company. This will mean that people within the company can only see information relevant to their job. These members of staff will be trained so that they know what is expected of them and how to keep the data safe. The second measure that I can take is to use encryption. First, for the members of staff to use passwords when accessing computers and email accounts so that they cannot be hacked. I will also need a payment system that will allow All-in-one to process transactions. Due to All-in-one being a small to medium enterprise, I will use payment methods like PayPal. The benefits of using these payment methods is that they're trusted, secure systems for cash transactions. PayPal will also hold all customer details, so this will help me comply with the Data Protection Act. For the All-in-one service, I will need to have access to people's bank and travel account details. This will need to be audited by the Information Commission's Office with a similar transaction payment as the NFC, which will allow All-in-one to use encryption to send information such as card details. Lastly, All-in-one will learn from TfL on their data collection handling. Once a customer has used the band, their details of transaction or travel will not be collected for marketing purposes, but for security or future reference. This will help All-in-one ID comply with the ICO guidelines on using RFID and its uses in regards to the Data Protection Act. So we will not be monitoring or profiling our customers.
Okay, so when thinking about some of the legislations that will be applicable to my digital business, I've considered a number of them. So as a price comparison website for male barbershops, particularly in student areas, there's going to be a lot of rules that will be applicable. So one of the first ones I looked at was the Equality Act of 2010. The reason for looking at this was that in mid-2012 there was a number of comparison sites, including GoCompare and Compare the Market, that broke this law. So the law was broken as these comparison sites were ignoring accessibility guidelines for disabled users. This was then impacting the users' ability to find the cheapest prices and therefore hindering them when in fact they could well need this the most. So another key consideration is the Data Protection Act. So as a medium between the trader and the consumer, it's imperative for comparison sites to balance both interest and legal rights. Therefore, a price comparison site must not let a provider have access to the customer's details unless permission was given. So further legislation to refer to is the Consumer Protection Against Unfair Regulations Act. So this is a law that covers a lot of elements, as I mentioned earlier, including false advertisements and conducting promotions fairly. So Groupon were guilty of this in 2011. They were guilty of 48 infringements of the Consumer Protection Against Unfair Regulations Act. One particular example was a promotion that offered cosmetic surgery at a limited price for a certain amount of time, with the ruling that it pressured consumers into making life-changing decisions in such a short time scale. So this was deemed unfair amongst the 48 regulations. So in addition to the mentioned laws, price comparisons must ensure they're abided by Misleading Marketing Act of 2008, ensuring that products are not compared against incomparable products and compared against the prices fairly.
My digital business sells GPS trackers for cats and dogs and allows you to live track your pet, and also sets a safety zone around the home, and you're alerted if the safety zone is breached. There's also a lot of other functions that come with the product. As the business is going to be operating from a digital platform, it must comply with e-trading laws or it may face legal action. Marketing deals are inevitable, such as Christmas offers and the January sale, as it's a prime time to sell higher quantities of stock at a reduced price, giving customers good value for money. It's important that offers are completely honest and consistent, as Mike O'Keefe found out as he saw a Thomas Cook advert stating, "Hurry, there's only 3 seats left on a flight to Florida." He bought one, and the next day he went on to go and see if he could get his wife a seat on the flight, and he found out there was actually more seats available, and now they're only being sold from £411 compared to the £496 that he paid. He felt pressured to buy the seats, and it's illegal under the consumer protection law for someone to force you to make a decision based on false information. Thomas Cook were not prosecuted, but they did receive bad PR, as Mike did go to BBC News and the story was published. It's also important to deal with customers in an efficient way during the returns and exchanges process, and you must have the returns information readily available. Next, they failed to refund delivery charges, and as they investigated this, they found out that multiple stores offered different returns policies. Under the distance selling regulation, customers who return goods within 7 days are entitled to a refund. It doesn't matter whether the product is unwanted or unsuitable, they must be refunded. But Next has been breaching the regulation by billing customers for delivery costs, even if the goods are returned within the 7 days. The Act was introduced in 2000 to protect customers who are unable to inspect the goods before they buy them. My business will offer free deliveries and returns to maximise customer satisfaction, and the customer service team will be happy to instantaneously refund any customer once the goods have been received.
Pathfinder is a digital business which will target a niche area of the project management industry. Selling to a niche business-to-business market does pose a few problems, however. For instance, will it be cost effective to have a salesman working full-time for a product which may only be sold twice per year? My solution is to completely digitalise the process. From purchasing the product to learning how to use it, it will all be done online. A vital regulation which needs to be taken into consideration is the Electronic Commerce Regulation. This Act covers the selling of products/services online, therefore must be abided by, as it directly applies to my business. To ensure I comply with this regulation, the purchasing page of my website will be modelled around this Act. When placing the order, the user will have to go through the process of reading terms and conditions. They will be notified about any tax included and a complete price list, and then finally be sent out an order confirmation with my company registration number and location included. Another legislation which will affect my business is the Data Protection Act. Once the product is purchased, an online form will need to be filled in to complete the purchase. As a consequence, the data will be saved onto a database for our records. To ensure we follow the Act, we will be kept secure in both an online and paper format. Emails will be sent to the customer on an annual basis, giving them the opportunity to update their data or remove it from our files for future business use. Failure to follow these principles of these Act can result in fines and even prosecutions, therefore are essential.
Oh, Sean. In addition to the laws discussed, there are additional laws that are still applicable to digital businesses.
Digital businesses need to comply with these laws and legislations to avoid legal action and reputational damage. I hope you enjoyed the video today, and we're here to answer any questions.
They won't let me out. They won't let me out. They won't let me out. No, they won't let me out. 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 No, they won't let me out.